Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the third lesson in this series, and today we will be talking about a new makhraj, and that is the makhraj of the tongue, al-lisan. Out of today's video, we want to get 4 main points in terms of learning outcomes. The first is to understand makhraj al-lisan. The second one is to understand the different areas of the lisan, or the different parts of the lisan. The third one is to understand which letters come from the furthest point in the lisan and how do they come about. And the fourth main point we want to get out is some of the common errors with these letters from the furthest point of the lisan. So Bismillah, let's start. Firstly, I want you to use your imagination with me for a little bit. And let's look at our tongue. Let's look from the top onto our tongue. So if we take our tongue out and we're looking at it from the top, where that's the back of it and that's the front of the tongue. So to first understand the different parts of the tongue, let's go from the very back. The very back, we'll call it the furthest part of the lisan. Furthest part from where? You remember from the last time we spoke about Makhraj, we always talk about relative to the lips in this circumstance. So we say the furthest point from the lips. So that's the furthest point of the lisan. Then there's the middle part of the lisan, and then there's the tip of the lisan, the kind of the front end. And why are we talking about this? Well, I'll have some pictures and we'll go into a bit more detail in a second. Now that we've got that imagination part of the lisan done, now do something with me here for a second. Take your tongue and touch your top gums just behind your front teeth. So if that's your front teeth, touch the top gums right there. Go ahead and touch them. And now what we want to do is we want to roll that tongue back, touching the top of the palate, and we want to go along the palate. So when you start at the gums and you go back a bit, you'll feel a hard part of the palate. The front end is a bit hard. And you keep bringing that tongue back, keep bringing it back, you'll feel that there's a softer part towards the back end. So the front, just behind the gums, there's a hard part of the palate. And then if you keep bringing the tongue back, there's a softer part of the palate. You could call them a bony part and a meaty part, but let's just call them a hard part and a soft part of the palate. And these two areas of the palate are very important when it comes to the letters we'll talk about in a second. Let's go to some pictures and describe the tongue and look at the palate once again in a bit more detail. So here's the tongue to start off with. This is the view from the top. And if you look at the tongue from the top, we can divide it into 3 parts. We've got the first part, this from the very back, so that we can call the furthest part. So that's the furthest part of the tongue away from the lips. And then you've got, right here, you've got the middle part. So that's the middle part of the tongue. And then if you go forward, you've got right there, you've got the tip of the tongue. All right, so you've got the furthest part way back here. You've got the middle part and you've got the tip. Now with some great animation work, I can just change that to become much more readable. The furthest part of the tongue, the middle of the tongue, and the tip of the tongue. So when we talk about furthest part, some of the letters that come from there, or 2 of the letters that come from there, are qaf and kaf. Aqo, ak, try it. Aqo, ak. You'll feel that comes from the furthest part of the tongue. And then the middle part, you've got aj, ay, ash, the jim, the ya, not maddiya, and the sheen. We'll have different videos for these letters, Insha'Allah. And from the tip of the tongue, there's a few letters, for example, at, an, and there's many more that use the tip of the tongue. All right, so what we'll be talking about today is the letters from the furthest part of the tongue, which are the qaf and the kaf. So now let's go to the qaf to start off with in terms of makhraj. When you look at this image, what you've got is the furthest point of the tongue, so towards the very back of the tongue, right there, that furthest point is touching the top of the palate, and it's touching the meaty area of the palate. So when you look at that diagram, that red part there is the soft palate, or the meaty part. That yellow part that we touched before, that's the hard part of the palate, or the bony part if you want to call it. So with the qaf, what you have is the furthest point of the tongue, furthest from where? From the lips. The furthest point of the tongue is touching the soft palate. It's touching the soft palate. So the makhraj of the qaf is to say that the furthest part of the tongue and what lies opposite to it from the roof of the mouth in terms of the soft palate. So what lies opposite to it of the soft palate. Now why do we say that? Let's go to the makhraj of the kaf. So the kaf, on the other hand, it's still from the same area of the tongue, so it's still from the furthest point of the tongue, but it's what lies opposite to it from the soft palate, that red one, and the hard palate. So the soft palate and the hard palate. So the makhraj of the kaf, try it, ak is from the furthest part of the tongue and what lies opposite to it from the soft and hard palate. Let's go back, try aqu. Have a feel, aqu. Where is it touching? Aqu, it's touching further back. And ak, that's touching a bit forward. That's where the hard and soft palate are. And let's look at them together here on one page to compare side by side. Qaf on the right, further back, soft palate. The kaf is from the furthest point of the tongue with a soft and hard palate. So that's the qaf, aqu, ak, aqu, aqu, ak. See how they're both from the furthest point of the tongue. However, one of them hits the soft palate, one of them hits the hard and soft palate, or what's opposite to it from the hard and soft palate. And that's an important differentiation when we talk about some of the common errors. So far we've spoke about the tongue, the makhraj of the lisan, the tongue. We've split the tongue into 3 different areas in terms of the furthest point, the middle point, and the tip. And then we talked about the makhraj of the qaf, which is with the soft palate, so the furthest point of the tongue with what lies opposite to it of the soft palate, and the makhraj of the kaf, which is the furthest point in the tongue, which with what lies opposite to it from the soft and hard palate. Now, all these definitions, there must be a reason for it, and let's talk about some of the common errors, which is the 4th point we want to take away from this video. Some of the common errors with these letters and why it's important to understand the makhraj in more detail. And as we said in a previous video about common errors, normally it's because of our accents. So a lot of these errors are actually slang accents that we use in day-to-day language, Arabic accents or even any other mother tongue language. So let's talk about the qaf, some of the common errors with the qaf. So in my native slang accent, we don't actually say qaf. We don't say qala, we say al. We say al. So we change the qaf. And in other accents, they do the same thing, they change it. So we want to make sure that we get the right Quranic Arabic as it was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ when we read the Quran with the right makhraj. So with the letter qaf, some of the common errors or some of the common mistakes, one of them is mixing between the qaf and the kaf. So if we say qalu, that's correct, qalu. But you'll hear a mistake and someone might say qalu, qalu. And what that is a kaf, but a bit thick. That's not a qaf. Ka. So a ka is a kaf, not a qaf. So what's the error exactly? If you think about when we go back to makharij, the error is because of where we touch the palate. Are we touching the softer part of the palate at the back? Or the soft and hard ka or ka. Now there's no Arabic letter saying ka anyway, but that's where the makhraj is incorrect. That causes this error. It's an error in the makhraj if we say ka. Another error with the letter qaf is to change the qaf to a jim, for example, or something similar to a jim. Ga, galu, rather than qalu, ga, or ag, rather than aqo. And that comes from some accents as well. And the third common error with the letter qaf is mixing it with another letter and mixing it with gha, the gha sound, ghaim. So, ghalu, ghalu, al-bagharah, rather than al-baqarah, gha, not qa. So these are only some of the common mistakes of the qaf, and they're all related to the makhraj itself. The makhraj, or i.e. the furthest point of the lisan, isn't hitting where it's supposed to hit, or isn't touching the opposite side of the soft palate. And that's the correct makhraj of the qaf. So let's summarize once again and capture the main learning outcomes we want to capture. First one is, we identified the makhraj of the lisan. The lisan means the tongue. The second point was to split up the tongue and different parts. And we described the furthest point of the tongue, furthest from where? From the lips. Then the middle part of the tongue and the tip of the tongue. And we talked about the two letters that come from the furthest point of the tongue, and the two letters are qaf and kaf, aqo and ak. These two letters come from the furthest point in the tongue. And then the fourth point is, we spoke about some of the common errors with qaf, which are really attributed to an incorrect makhraj. So I'll leave you with that for this video, and Insha'Allah in the next video we'll talk about the middle part of the tongue. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.